welcome to Policy and Politics with me, Tarun Nangia. Today we have a very special show and a very special subject. Our guest today is Mr. Anil Swarup, a career IS officer. Last you saw him as secretary in the Department of School Education. He was also heading the Coal Ministry as Secretary Coal, and was also part of the headed the project monitoring group in the Cabinet Secretariat, where projects worth lakhs of crores which were struck were unentangled. So with his vast career in the services, he was posted in Uttar Pradesh, or that is his cadre. He started with Devriya in Uttar Pradesh and has had a very interesting career over these past 3 decades, where he's worked with people like Kalyan Singh, which was at the time of the Babri Masjid demolition, and so on and so forth. Today we are going to discuss his book, which is very interestingly titled Not Just a Civil Servant. This is the book which is going to be released this week. Here is this cover of this book, and we are now going to delve and do a curtain raiser of this book, chapter by chapter, with none other than Mr. Anil Swarup. Sir, welcome to Policy and Politics. And since we have the pleasure of talking to you once again, I would want to know from you, first, the motivation that you had behind penning this book, because this idea would have germinated long ago.
Yes, indeed. I did have an idea of writing a book like this. The bottom line of writing this book was to convey to the public at large and to some of the bureaucrats that no matter what the conditions, if a civil servant so desires, he can deliver on the ground. That is one. And second, my feeling is that a civil servant has to be much beyond what is known as civil servant. He has to be a human being. He must understand human beings. If you understand human beings, then you'll be able to do good to them. And if you're able to do good to them, then you'll enjoy life. I enjoyed life, every moment of it.
Now, I want to make a personal submission here. You are known somebody, if I would call in Hindi, somebody who a lot of other officers talk as a dabang officer. Somebody who is free and frank, in your face. What is in your mind is on your tongue. And you're never to mince words. Even with power or authority, you have spoken it and you have lived your life like this for the past 30-35 years. Knowing that history of you, and a person's image precedes him, in your case that image is of what I've just spoke of. Is it a conscious decision from day one to live like that, or it evolved over the years? Or were you constructed like that since childhood?
I don't really know. I mean, I have evolved over a period of time. Yes, there were certain principles that I inherited from my father, who was also a civil servant. He was an engineer. But I also evolved as I went along, and I discovered that I was enjoying greater satisfaction in being what I was and the way I was evolving. So I continued the way that I was. It's ultimately, as I said, the bottom line is what you enjoy. I enjoyed doing what I did.
And we'll start from the preface of the book, very interestingly written by Nandan Nilekani. And he has frankly spoken about that you were very free and frank when you spoke of the overhang of 5 C's, the CBI, the CVC, the CAG, the CIC and the courts, which are stifling administration in this country. And there was no bureaucrat who would have, had the guts, if I say so, to speak of these things while he was sitting and in position. First of all, when did you work with Nandan first, and how did this relationship grow, in the sense of what was the working experience with him?
No, I never worked with Nandan. Okay. I was doing this scheme called Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which was a smart cost-based insurance scheme.
Yes.
And as I was doing it, Nandan was appointed to work out an identification program, which ultimately came to be known as Aadhaar. So when he landed in Delhi, when he was assigned this task, very surprisingly, he walked into my office. He came to understand what I was doing in biometric. In fact, we had a common friend in Gurcharan Das who had advised him to meet me to understand what was happening on the biometric front. And from there on, I think a very interesting relationship evolved. I learned a lot from him. He's a very hard taskmaster. I saw him how he went about getting things done and came up with this successful experiment of Aadhaar. And we used to share a lot of thoughts. Thereafter, when I became Secretary of School Education, I got in touch with Nandan all over again and wanted to use his platform, Ek-Step platform, for education purpose. So I have had a very interesting relationship, very rewarding relationship with Nandan. So I had requested him to write this forward.
Now we start from the very beginning. You said that your future was decided the first day you was born because your father wanted you to be an IS officer. It was a natural progression for you to become one, or this was your own calling?
No, I didn't have a calling as far as becoming an IS officer is concerned.
Yes.
As I have written in my book, my father did take this call, and my entire schooling was done with a view to preparing me for the IS. Of course, after having put in 38 years as a civil servant, I would like to be an IS officer all over again if I were to go on again. Yes. So that would be my call. But I think the first one was taken by my father.
Okay. And your book, there is a chapter titled as Hectic Days and Sleepless Nights, the Police Academy. You qualified for the IPS?
Yes, first I qualified for the IPS. And I had a very interesting interaction with a batchmate of mine who walked up to me one day and was very concerned about the increase in petroleum prices. So I asked him that it's nice to be concerned about it, but you shouldn't be spending sleepless nights over it. And he agreed and he went back. After some days, he came back to me again. He said that he's spending sleepless nights. So I told him that the petroleum prices had come down on their own. There are few things over which you have no control and you should not be unnecessarily bothered about it. But he said that his problem now was that the population of the country was increasing. So I jokingly told him, if you sleep in the night, the population will come down. I was trying to convey to him that we should not unnecessarily be bothered about issues over which we have no control.
And this switch from IPS to IS, how did it happen?
No, I think I had prepared hard to get into the IS. In the first year I didn't. Second year I got it. The switch was very interesting one because the training at the police academy was very tough. And when I went to the Mussoorie Academy, there it was much more relaxed an atmosphere. Of course, the people that I met both at the police academy as well as the National Academy of Administration, outstanding people. We had probably the finest time of our lifetimes as probationers, as we would call them.
Okay. And could you take us through your life on your first posting and your first district?
You know, I got posted first at Hardoi, but I think I learned more when I went over to district Devariya. At that point in time, Kushinagar was a part of Devariya district. Okay. Now, of course, it's a separate district. Okay. I was a joint magistrate there, and I had some very, very interesting experiences, one of which is narrated in the book regarding the case that came before me of overcrowded jeep. I thought it was a high-handedness on the part of the police. So I dismissed the case. But one day, while traveling, I caught hold of a taxi and got the people to come down. I discovered the taxi was carrying 2 more than the allegation that was made earlier. So I learned it the hard way. Anything could happen in UP.
Now, very interestingly, one of your chapters is titled What They Don't Teach at Business School. This is the subheading, and the chapter is called Management Skills of a Different Kind. It speaks about your time in Lakhimpur Kheri.
Yes.
It also speaks about your brush with the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. Could you share some anecdotes for you?
You know, that was another very interesting experience, because in the district, the manner in which you handle people and situations has nothing to do with what they teach you at the management schools. It comes from within, and I was fortunate to have a fabulous team. But in my stint as district magistrate, I came across floods. I came across the Ram Janmabhoomi agitation. I came across Mandal agitation. There was that Tikait rally. Anything that you could think of was there in the days that I spent in the district. But I very distinctly remember that in one of the instances, I had put behind the bars the head of the district of the ruling party. And it was a tough decision to be taken. Because I took that decision because this gentleman wanted to carry out a funeral procession that would have created riots. This was the time when Ram Janmabhoomi was happening. So I put him behind the bars. Late in the evening, the chief minister asked me why I had done that. So I told him the circumstances. And in those days, the politicians did listen to you. He listened to me. And I didn't have to relieve him. Lakhimpur Kheri was the only district where we didn't have to impose curfew, whereas in all other districts, curfew was imposed, because people had a belief that if they did wrong, there would be trouble for them.
Okay. And you have a very interesting headline for one of the instances of Yes Chief Minister. What is this?
This was another very interesting incident. I had just come over to Lucknow after my district posting, and I was posted as Special Secretary in the Chief Minister's Secretariat. Okay. And one day I was sitting with him, and there was the Chief Secretary and the DGP also there. And the Chief Minister was to hold 7 by-election meetings, and he was agitated. He said that how will I do that? And he asked his personal staff to cancel the last 2 meetings. And the Chief Secretary and the DGP agreed with him, but I disagreed with him. I conveyed my advice to him, unsolicited advice. I told him, sir, I have come from the district. And when a chief minister visits a district, a lot of preparatory work happens. So even if you go for 2 minutes, you must go there, don't cancel it. He got a bit annoyed with me and said, how do you think I can go? And as he was saying this, the chief secretary kept nudging me to keep quiet. Then there was a pin drop silence. After 15 seconds, the Chief Minister agreed with me. He said, yes, Anilji, you are right. By which time the Chief Secretary had stopped nudging me and he agreed totally with the Chief Minister.
So these are instances.
Very interesting incident. I can't forget that. In fact, this incident was narrated to me by the Chief Minister himself long after that.
Is it?
Yes, he narrated. I had forgotten about it. He narrated that why he trusted me was that he knew that I am going to speak my mind out. And I had told the Chief Minister then also, it's my job to advise you. You have to take a decision. But if you stop me from advising, then my job is over. I don't have to be there.
True. Very interestingly, one heading that I see here is the pickup story, pulling up a sinking ship. Now, what this chapter is about?
No, this is another interesting experience. Pickup was the State Financial Corporation incurring losses for 7 years.
Yes.
So I was posted there with a view to winding it up.
Yes.
But we came up with a solution and got the whole team together.
Yes.
And it turned around. But the interesting bit was, though I got the credit of the turnaround, the credit really goes to a general manager, Devendra Singh. I can go on record and say he had a terrible reputation of being pretty corrupt. And I called him over for a cup of tea and requested him that if you could cooperate with me, we could jointly turn around the corporation. My view was that, by and large, most of the dishonest people are very efficient.
Is it?
Yeah, by and large, because they would be behind the bars if they weren't. They're very, very, very efficient. If you can turn them around, it can turn around an organization. This was demonstrated in Pickup. Devendra Singh was one of the finest officers that I came across. He gave up his other practices, he joined hands, and we jointly turned around. And he continued to do well even after I left the organization. Probably he used the word kick. He said he got such a fantastic kick about doing good things that he continued to do that. In fact, I have stuck on to that word kick subsequently in all my presentations to explain that it is ultimately the kick of an individual. What gives you a kick gets you going. Okay. So he got probably a kick on account of the recognition that he got for turning around the organization.
And do you think for somebody like you who's, you've always said that secretaries and the leaders' charge is mainly man management.
Absolutely.
You help people in finding their calling and their kick?
That is it. I mean, that's what I do. In each of my assignment, I have not worked for more than 2 to 3 months. I've been able to find people who can do job better than me. There are many of them. My job is to locate them, empower them, give them space and enable them to do
One another interesting heading from your book says, on board with bats and rats. What is this about?
You know, I had volunteered to be shifted out from one of the assignments because I was asked to suspend a few officers in UP and I said that they didn't deserve to be suspended. So they shifted me out and I was very happy with it. When I reached this Board of Revenue office, I found that in that particular room where I was, which was allotted to me, was a pretty huge room. But there was some noise coming from somewhere, tuck, 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 tuck. So I looked up and saw there were a host of bats on the ceiling making that noise. And similarly, when you look down, you had a carpet which was half eaten by the rats.
And so you were working in such kind of, in UP administration, one can...
No, this was a very exceptional case of Board of Revenue. But the good thing was that in 8 months that I was there, I could get rid of the bats and the rats. It was a great sense of satisfaction. We could digitize all the court cases. So it did work. I mean, it was quite a challenge, but I enjoyed it.
Okay. You've also dealt with a lot of bats and rats in the coal and the education sector.
They were of a different variety. They were much fatter bats and fatter rats.
So we'll come to that. But very interestingly, this chapter I think would interest most viewers when it all came crashing down. 6 December 1992, even relevant today politically. This is the chapter heading and we will discuss with Mr. Swarup what was this about. What was this chapter about?
You know, everyone is aware that a congregation had happened around December in Ayodhya.
Right.
And contrary to the general impression about Mr. Kalyan Singh, here was a man who was trying to get things going in UP. He was turning Ulta Pradesh into Uttam Pradesh, as it were.
Right.
And even in case of Babri Masjid, he was engaging with a lot of groups to see how a peaceful solution could be found. I distinctly remember he did manage to convince a number of people. He used to give examples of Aswan Dam where masjids were shifted from one place to the other for the construction of the dam. And he had a similar thing in mind. He was suggesting that why can't this masjid be lifted and shifted to another place and a temple could be built here. It's not that he had found a solution, but he was moving in that direction. And he was all against bringing down a Babri Masjid. He was never in favor of that. In fact, he was not in favor of congregations also. But then, of course, in politics, there are many decision makers. The congregation did happen and the masjid did come out. I recall the angst that was quite visible when he had an interaction with both Mr. Advani and Mr. Bhairav Singh Shekhawat on telephone. He was very agitated. Ultimately, he cooled down and said, I'll take all the responsibility of what has happened. No officer shall be called to question.
Is it?
It's amazing to find politicians, because now you have a prime minister saying that I was wrongly advised and Mr. Harish Gupta had to suffer all the consequences. But you had Mr. Kalyan Singh who said no officer should be held liable for this. So you have all sorts of politicians, but I think it's difficult to find people
very
like Mr. Kalyan Singh.
Very interestingly said by Mr. Anil Swarup that in that point of time, Kalyan Singh said, no officer shall suffer, I should take all responsibility. On this note, I'll take a short break and we'll discuss more on Mr. Swarup's health and education stint, which also forms a large part of his book, but after the break. Welcome back. On Mr. Anil Swarup's book, which is titled Not Just a Civil Servant, we will now discuss about his stints in the brush with the education, health and the coal sector. Sir, you have very interestingly pointed out in your episode, Serving the Poorest of the Poor, about your experiences in the health sector. Could you share with us at length, please?
Very surprisingly, this health scheme was in the Labour Ministry.
Okay.
In fact, in the first 3 months, I used to wonder why nothing happens in Labour Ministry, and I came to the following conclusion. We were all in labour and by definition we couldn't deliver.
Yes.
And hence we were always in pain, not delivering anything. But the Prime Minister announced a health insurance scheme, which no ministry wanted to take. Right. And since no one wanted to take, Labour Ministry was asked to do this health insurance scheme.
That's how it came.
That's how it came. So, and of course when it came, it was probably the only paperless, cashless, portable health insurance scheme in the world.
Ayushman Bharat is not the first one. This is a precursor to Ayushman Bharat.
I would believe that. I think a lot of it had happened earlier. Okay. Of course, Ayushman Bharat is a much larger scale. But I think the groundwork was laid in the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, where it did become probably the only paperless health insurance scheme in the world, and catering to hundreds of thousands of people. It came to be recognized world over. In fact, UNDP and ILO called it one of the finest health insurance schemes. World Bank thought that this scheme should be replicated elsewhere in the world. I remember in one of the visits to Washington, President Obama's team invited me to make a presentation at the Brookings Institute. And while making a presentation, there were representatives of Bill Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation. And after the presentation, this Bill Gates Foundation gentleman came up to me and asked me, Mr. Swarup, you are a civil servant. You seem to be very passionate about the scheme. What are you getting out of it? I said, I asked him a counter question. I asked him, Gates Foundation gives millions of dollars to poor countries. What do you get out of it?
Yes.
And he said, we derive a lot of satisfaction. I said, you've answered my question. This scheme was meant for the poorest of the poor. Quite a few of them would have been dead but for the assistance that they got from this scheme. And the good wishes of these people came back to me. I narrated an incident to him. In one of the visits to one of the middling hospitals, I was talking to a beneficiary patient. I heard a very feeble voice from behind. I turned around and I saw a very old woman calling me. She was also a patient, a beneficiary. I went up to her and I asked her, Mata ji, aap theek to hain? She said, हाँ बेटा मैं बहुत तकलीफ में हूँ, लेकिन अस्पताल वालों ने मेरा बड़ा ख्याल किया है. So then I told her, then you will be all right. You will be able to go home. She said, no, मेरा तो कोई घर नहीं है, मैं तो भीख मांगती थी. मेरे पास ये तुम्हारा स्मार्ट कार्ड था, वो मुझे यहाँ ले आए, मुझसे पैसे भी नहीं ले रहे हैं, मेरे पास है भी नहीं देने को. Then I again said, माता जी फिर तो आप ठीक हो जाएंगी. Then she made a very remarkable statement. She said, मेरी तो उम्र इतनी हो गई, अब मैं ऊपर वाले के पास जाऊंगी, लेकिन ऊपर वाले से जाके एक बात जरूर कहूंगी, तुम्हारी स्कीम बहुत अच्छी है. Here was a destitute woman understanding the importance of the scheme, prepared to get the blessings of the Almighty.
So you mean the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which you got an opportunity to set up, laid the groundwork for the Ayushman Bharat, which today is taking it to all over the country?
I'm glad that they have got onto that scheme, because indeed, when you start a scheme, there are problems. There were indeed problems with RSBY. But I'm happy that Ayushman Bharat has taken care of some aspects of our RSBY and taking it onto scale.
Yes. Since you've said this was your experience in serving the poorest of the poor, could you call it one of the most satisfying assignments?
Oh, it was certainly the most satisfying experience, because, you were addressing issues relating to the poorest. As I said, quite a few of them would have been dead, but for the assistance they got under the scheme. So it gave me a lot of satisfaction.
And since you have dealt a lot on RSBY, but you have also spoke on your time in the coal ministry. How would you describe that stint, and what is the takeaway that you share in this book?
See, coal ministry came after I was doing a stint as head of the project monitoring group. That also was a very interesting experience. But when I got posted at Secretary Coal, I did not know much about coal sector. Right. So I asked a friend of mine, "Yaar, ye sector kaisa hai?" So his response was very interesting. He asked me, "Have you seen Gangs of Wasseypur?" So, that was my introduction to coal ministry.
But did it turn out to be that?
No, it was pretty bad to begin with. Okay. I mean, the CAG report had devastated decision making. In the coal ministry, it was like walking into a graveyard because no one was prepared to take a decision.
Yes.
We did undertake those coal block auctions, but not many people were prepared to commit themselves on the file.
Yes.
A number of files were initiated at the level of secretary. I couldn't push those joint secretaries. In coal, probably I got one of the finest team of joint secretaries I had in my entire career. Absolutely amazing set of officers. In fact, we used to jokingly say that you give us the Kashmir problem, we might be able to solve it. So it was such a fantastic team comprising Ajay Bhalla, who's presently Power Secretary, Vivek Bhardwaj, Rajesh Sinha. These are absolute gems. You can take them anywhere and they'll solve the problem. The beauty was you had these civil servants who were prepared to find solutions to the problem. They were not becoming part of the problem. And it was a pleasure working with them. I started with 24/7. In fact, I used to spend some nights at coal ministry. At the end of 2 years, I had only 45 minutes of work. In fact, I used to go to the Prime Minister's office and tell them, please merge this ministry with Mines Ministry, and jokingly tell them, if you don't do that, I'll create problem to justify my existence. So ultimately, probably they thought I was creating too much noise there in coal ministry doing nothing. So they shifted to education ministry.
But I think from where you headed to coal ministry was probably the most interesting assignment of your career. We could see you traveling to villages.
Yes.
I saw you somewhere on a village in Maharashtra, in some school.
Yeah.
So you went to Kerala, you went to Maharashtra, UP. What was the education experience?
When I used to jokingly tell people that probably government was looking for the most uneducated civil servant, and they found in Mr. Anil Swarup the educated one, because I had no experience whatsoever in education. But I think that was one of the finest experiences of my lifetime in education. I remember in the first few months, or not few months, first month, there were too many advisors telling me what to do. We call them Rai Sahabs in UP, who give you the advice and then walk away. And I discovered that not much can be done through the advice, because the advice was based on what is happening in England, Finland, Holland, Scotland, even Swaziland. So all the lands of the world. So I decided, okay, then I'll travel through the motherland and see if something has happened here. I traveled to about 24 states in the country. And what I saw was absolutely amazing. And when I say states to the country, I used to travel to districts like Bastar and Sukma. I drove from Pune to Goa, dropping down on the way to look at these schools there to understand what is the ground reality. I drove from Srinagar to Leh, not taking the national highway, taking 2 days to visit to reach Leh, look at the schools, what is happening. So this was an amazing experience. And I must share one experience with you. There were many such experiences. I saw what wonderful work was being done in the hinterland of this country, and there was so much to learn from them. I walked into this school in a place called Pastepada, 120 kilometers north of Thane district in tribal area. And that school did not have any electricity. When I entered the classroom, I found that every child had a tablet. And there was a smart screen. So I asked the teacher, Sandeep Gund, how is this happening? Where is the electricity coming from? So he took me beside the school and showed me a foldable solar panel through which he was charging these batteries, in turn were charging the tablets. So I said, how did you manage to get all this in this remote place? So he explained to me that when he had come to this school, there were about 30-40 children of all ages. And he had a second-hand laptop. So he used to play educational videos on those laptops, and children used to congregate around it and start learning. So after 2 months, some parents, about 20 of them, came to the school and asked him, how is it that my child wants to go to the school now? Earlier, he didn't want to go to the school. So he explained to them what is the attraction. And then when he found the parents interested, he made a request to them. He asked them to contribute something for the tablets. They contributed something, and he bought a couple of tablets and attached them to the laptop. By which time, some NGO and some CSR funding agency got to know of his effort. They visited the school and decided to fund these tablets. Around this time, I visited the school. And when I saw this fantastic work being done by Sandeep Gund, I took a photograph with him and tweeted him. Certainly, he became a local hero. And then I met the President of India on a different context. I narrated this incident to him. And I asked him whether he would like to meet Sandeep Gund. Yes. So Sandeep Gund came to Delhi. He met him. Suddenly, he became a national hero. The beauty is that this model of Pastepada, I am told, has now been implemented in 60,000 schools of Maharashtra.
Already?
Yes. And about 350 crores has been raised through crowdfunding, not by the government.
When you talk of driving change, you do it.
This is it. And we picked up about 111 models. We had 7-day workshop here, understood how it is done. Then we picked up 24 such models, this being one of them, took them back to the states where they could replicate and scale it. You know, all this fight about public versus private is nonsense. There's so much space for public as well as private. The efficiencies will come from the private sector. The scale will come from the public sector. In my stint as education secretary, as a principal facilitator for education, I tried to get these two together, and I'm glad a few things happened.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Swarup, for sharing your time and giving us your time for this interview. Thank you.